Monday, February 12th. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, in layman's terms, we talk about the parts of computer networking that you might actually care about.
Let's do this. Well, for anyone who maybe listens to only Monday, it is the officialness. I am the job quitting and the new job getting.
And the weird grammar using.
Indeed.
B.
Fair. No, I finally quit my job of sit in the middle of nowhere and do nothing.
And get paid a lot of money to do that.
Yep, and get paid a lot of money to sit in the middle of nowhere and do nothing. I quit that job, and now I get paid 35% more to sit in the city and do something. The same similar somethings to what I was supposed to be doing, but for somebody else.
So basically, someone's paying you more money to actually do your job.
Exactly.
And now you get to take a train instead of driving, which while driving is actually cheaper, even as far as we drive, the train is so much nicer.
The train is so much nicer. And, I will have to leave a bit earlier in the morning, and I'll get home a little bit later.
You'd better not try to take a shower between about 6:30 and 7:30.
No, I'll probably be leaving the train that I'm going to take leaves at 7:05. So I'll probably be taking a shower between 6 and 6:30.
See, now, it's sad. Lately, I used to get up around 6 and leave the house before 7. Now I wake up around 7 and I run out the door with a Red Bull by like 7:45.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, when I worked in the city, I would wake up at 5:36, be at the train at 7:05, and I'd get home about 6. So it was like a 12-hour day. And then when I was working in the middle of nowhere, towards the end when I was getting lazy, I was like leaving a little bit after 8 and getting home at like 5.
Yeah, but see, if I had a train commute instead of a driving commute, while my driving commute is actually fairly short, the fact that I could basically not have my morning commute, I get up, shower, all this stuff. Once I'm on the train, just go to sleep. Someone will wake me up when I get to Grand Central.
Yeah, even if no other passengers in the train will wake you up, there's a person after the train gets to the station. Their job is to walk down the train, collect stuff for the lost and found, et cetera, et cetera. They will wake you up if you're sleeping there.
Yep. And then on the way home, I can do stuff like read manga. I can't read manga while I'm driving my car as much as I've tried to.
Yeah, I will definitely pick up probably the reading rate and the DS game playing rate and decrease the podcast listening rate. But
you know what? Honestly, more and more, I've been listening to fewer and fewer podcasts.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a pen radio in months. It just,
It's kind of lost its charm.
Yeah.
Not podcasting, just pen radio.
Yeah.
I still listen to Byzantine Emperors. It just, I don't know, some podcasts I used to listen to have gotten long to the point where I can't listen to them at all. They're just so long, I'll never get to the end.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't start the new job until March 1st, and I don't have to work until then. I got nothing to do.
Yeah,
so
you're a homemaker.
I'm going to be doing some awesome shit between now and then, starting tomorrow, where I go to the dentist.
Outstanding. Followed probably by a rousing game of Super Mario World, some autoerotic stimulation in the privacy of the home. I imagine you're going to do some grocery shopping and make copies for Katsukan. And
yeah, that's about it. That's a good guess.
Yep. And of course, before we go any further, we're going to remind everyone all week, mostly because we're going to be gone starting Thursday, but this weekend from Thursday until Sunday, we are going to be in Washington, D.C., at Katsukan.
At the Omni Shoreham Hotel.
Yep, Katsukan is one of my favorite anime conventions. It's also one of the largest.
It's one of the top 10 biggest anime conventions in the United States.
It's a great con. It's also more of an older crowd con. Like, most of the people there tend to be more our age, as opposed to Otakon, where it's people 3 to 4 years younger than us.
That's not to say that there won't be punk kids there.
Oh, no.
The percentage of punk kids will be less than the percentage of punk kids at, say, Kineticon, Anime Next, or Otakon.
It also is a very special con in that mostly now the cons I go to aren't hotel cons. They're convention center cons, meaning they end.
Yep.
Now, pretty much Anime Central and Katsukan are the only hotel cons I've gone to in a long time. And it's a totally different vibe. They go 24/7. People tend to stay in the bar all night, mostly staffers who should be working.
Yeah, 24/7 con is definitely a completely different experience than a convention con that closes and you actually go to bed at some point.
Yeah, I mean, PenguinCon was great like that. Nothing was better than wandering out of the room at 3 in the morning and seeing like Neil Gaiman just wandering around looking for something to do.
Yeah, PenguinCon was excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so what news is going on here?
Well, it looks like, I don't remember the name of the guy, it doesn't really matter, but someone in the legislature of New York State is putting forth an interesting idea in regards to traffic law, and I'm not sure how I feel about this.
All right.
Basically, they want to make it a crime, punishable by a fine and whatever, just like DUI or all that other stuff, to drive while tired.
Huh.
Now, on one hand, a good number of accidents, well, I won't say accidents, traffic collisions in the United States are caused very obviously and directly by people falling asleep at the wheel or being too tired to pay attention.
That is true.
But on the other hand, tired is a 100% subjective.
Well, I'm sure there might be a way to measure some sort of tiredness, but it's not as easy as, say, the breathalyzer test for alcoholness.
Yeah, but then again,
it's not like they can just walk up and judge you like, you're 2.1 tired. That's 0.3 over the limit. You're getting a ticket.
Even though at the same time, I'm not going to get into it, but I take issue with, I mean, not to be perfectly clear, people who drive drunk are jackasses. Deserve to be in jail.
Yep.
However, it seems like groups like MAD have pushed in some places, the level at which you are now a drunk driver way below the point where alcohol has any measurable effect.
Yes, that is definitely the case. I mean, the law in Connecticut was like 0.1. It's like, if you have one beer, you can't drink. I mean, okay, sure, someone who drinks should not drive. One beer, you can drive, I think. I would drive in a car if the person driving, if I knew that if they just drank one beer and they hadn't drunk in anything else in, say, 24 hours, and that was it, I would let them drive.
Yeah.
I would have no problem.
I mean, very much I am super in favor of sobriety tests. Straight up test to see if this person is
Yeah,
competent.
I didn't even really mind, so much the roadblocks, however, rights, freedom infringing they might be. If it's just they look to make sure you're wearing your seatbelt and they, make sure you're not drunk. Seatbelt, not drunk. Seatbelt, not drunk. I don't really have a problem with that.
And see, the thing is, most drunk drivers, because all the statistics about alcohol-related accidents are kind of skewed in this country, but in general, if someone's actually a drunk driver, if you've pulled them over, it'll probably be obvious just by looking at them.
Hey, yeah.
But it looks like the rule they're proposing
I just stumbled out of that bar into my car. Dude.
Yeah, rummy. No one will believe him if we soak him in rum. But it seems like the rule they're looking at would be if you haven't slept in the past 24 hours. Now
that's an okay rule, I think.
The thing is, it seems
how do they
odd
prove
to me.
it?
Because one, you just lie. 2, I have only gone without sleep for a span of more than 24 hours 2 or 3 times in my life.
Yep.
And, sadly, in all of those times, I ended that streak by driving somewhere. Actually, the longest I ever stayed up was in high school. And I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I ended up staying awake for just about 3 days straight. And at the end of it all, I was driving home to go to bed. And then I woke up. First I'm driving and I see a red light. And I'm like, I should stop for that red light. And then I stop about 500 feet past the red light. But then, the next thing I know, I woke up and I had apparently just parked my car, realizing that I shouldn't be driving, and just gone to sleep, parked at the side of the road. Perfectly legally.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, I always think about it every time I've
done that more than once.
And I feel tired. I say, man, I should stop. But I've never actually done it because I've never reached the point at which I just couldn't drive anymore. If I reached that point, I would absolutely pull over and go to sleep.
I've reached that point dozens of times in my life, and every one of those times I've pulled over and taken a 15-minute nap, which always gave me enough power to keep going the rest of the way.
The other thing is I've always been tired close to the destination, so I just make it.
Yep.
I've never not made it, so I'm obviously doing something right.
The worst time ever. I was driving back from Rochester. I was just bored out of my skull, so I went out to Rochester from Poughkeepsie to visit. And I ended up staying 5 or 6 hours later than I'd intended. So I was driving back, a 5.5-hour drive. I'd left at 11 at night, and I had work the next day, which I obviously didn't go to. I ended up just parking at a rest stop and sleeping through the night.
Wow.
Because after about 3 hours of driving, I just knew I couldn't make it. There was no way I could have made it home. I was so miserable.
Yeah.
Of course, that was also the time I was sleeping at the rest stop, right? And then I woke up kind of halfway. And here's the thing. Imagine this. You're asleep. You wake up. The first thing you notice is that you're in a car in the driver's seat with the steering wheel in front of you. And the second thing you think is that the last thing you remember is driving somewhere and trying not to fall asleep. So I jumped and panicked and tried to turn the wheel and it wouldn't turn. And then I look around and I see that I'm parked next to a trucker in a rest stop. And this trucker's just looking at me with this look on his face. What the fuck is up with that guy?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. I probably want to read the actual law. In general, I really don't have any problem with police officers writing tickets to people who are demonstrably...
Demonstrably.
Yes, but I wanted to say it all the way through.
Yeah.
Obviously impaired for whatever reason. I mean, really, it doesn't matter how you're impaired. The fact remains you are impaired. If you're actually testably impaired, you shouldn't be driving, and it's okay if you get a ticket.
Yeah. I think what it really is going to end up boiling down to is that if you caused an accident being because of tiredness or sleepiness at the wheel, that you will be hit harder, which is fine by me.
Yeah, well, they do that now with alcohol, which I'm also fine with.
Yep.
Mostly.
All right. So, honeybees. We like honeybees. They make honey.
I had some honey a little while ago.
Apparently, there is a mysterious illness killing lots of honeybees.
Wait, is this that fungus thing from...
No, they don't know what it is. It's a complete mystery. It is true, though, that when they've dissected some of the dead bees, there was a high number of fungi, bacteria, and other organisms in the bees because the bees' immune systems have been weakened. So it could be bee AIDS or something like that, but we don't know. It's a mysterious bee illness killing bees everywhere.
Oh, that's just real. I mean, that harkens back to all those weird parasites that grow inside of bugs, but the bugs are still alive and then other bugs come out of them.
Oh, you want to hear something even freakier, right?
Great.
Okay, first of all, when you have like bees dying in a beehive, and you often find the dead bees littered around the hive. It's like there's a beehive. Bees die. You see dead bee corpses lying around. If a bee dies in the hive, a worker carries it out and just drops it on the ground.
Yeah.
With this mystery disease, the bees are apparently flying away from the hive before dying.
Huh. That's really kind of creepy. Maybe they know. Maybe it causes some sort of bee neuroses.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the bees are trying to escape from the crazy alien monster that is invading their hive.
Also, normally, when you have a bee colony that's weakened and there's fewer bees in it because a lot of them die, those beehives would usually be overrun by bees from other colonies or other things that would go after the honey.
See, I know about that because actually there's this long-running series on corrosion about beekeepers, which is actually really, really good, and I highly recommend it.
Like you have a beehive, right? And all of a sudden, half the bees in the beehive die. Well, now the beehive is pretty weak, and there's only half as many bees to defend the honey treasure. So someone's going to come and take it. Apparently, if your hive is struck with a mystery illness, it might be weeks before anything else comes to attack the hive to get the honey.
Huh.
So it's really kind of freaky.
I don't like the sound of this, but we better stock up on honey.
Yeah, well, you see, this is the thing. Apparently, I didn't even realize this. Obviously, bees are used to make honey. That's obvious.
Yes.
Also, bees are purposefully brought to agricultural farms
to pollinate
things.
Yes.
And this guy drove a truck full of bees across the country, and when he got there, most of the bees were dead because they got the disease.
Great.
And it's like, they could have the bees do it to make more bees, but it costs a lot of money. And if the disease comes, you have to do it again and again. And if you keep having to just keep trying to make more bees too many times,
keep playing.
You could go bankrupt trying to make more bees.
I just think back to that episode of El Hazard where Janai is like, I need more buggerum. And the queen insect woman is like,
all right, come with me.
Yep. And he's like, what? Where are we going? And she's like, you wanted
needed
more
buggerum? No, I love that part.
Too bad it's not that easy to make bees.
Yeah. But,
that's kind of creepy.
Yeah. The other thing, though, is, I don't know if people realize this, but when you go to the grocery store and you see maple syrup made from real maple trees in Canada, right? Or maybe somewhere else. And next to it, you see the fake maple syrup that's just made with sugar or corn syrup. The stuff they give you at the diner.
Aunt Jemima.
Yeah, Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima is not from a maple tree. Just so you know, people, Aunt Jemima is not from a maple tree.
Or a log cabin.
It is, log cabin. It's just sugar, and they process it to make it into maple syrup in a factory.
See, no, I actually don't mind log cabin at all.
Well, it's like, if I don't know, it almost tastes like the real thing, almost. So it's not so bad.
Well, I pick whichever one I want at the time.
At the grocery store, I will always buy real maple syrup. But in a diner, if they give me the crappy fake stuff, I'll eat it.
But see, if you can't tell that much, then why are you spending frou-frou money? I mean,
because I can tell. I just, and I prefer the better real syrup. But I will suffer the fake syrup.
But you yell at me when I buy the fancy bottle of wine as opposed to the slightly less fancy bottle of wine.
All right, there would be a difference if one bottle of wine was made with sugar, just flavored to taste like grapes, and one was made with actual grapes.
Yeah, there is wine like that. Remember that bottle of red wine I opened the other day?
Was that not made with actual grapes?
It was, but when you look at the ingredients on a bottle of wine, if it says anything, it says wine. That was a bottle of wine that was cheap enough to have things other than just wine in it.
Oh. Anyway, it might not be apparent to everyone, but in most parts of the United States, at least most parts of the United States that I've been to, there is a law, in my opinion, an evil, protectionist, anti-capitalist law that says you cannot make honey. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, all of the honey is honey from bees. They don't sell honey just made with sugar. There's no reason that we couldn't just take sugar and make something that is exactly or close to being exactly like honey. I would probably still buy the honey from bees, but that's not the point. There's a law that says we can't do that, meant to support beekeepers. And it keeps the price of honey up and the supply of honey lower. But now if there's a bee disease, the price of honey is going to go way up. Like, stupid crazy.
We should start making some bootleg honey and cash in.
You could get in so much trouble making bootleg honey, you have no idea.
I'm all about it.
It's all you. I mean, I imagine that if you had a big enough bootleg honey operation and they caught you, you might get in worse trouble than someone with a meth lab.
It'd be just like the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yes, Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we should do it. It'd be the Honey Rebellion.
Actually, we could just be poachers instead. I know where there's a bunch of beekeepers really close to our house.
You want to go get some bee suits and poach the honey?
Well, remember that park that we used to drive by all the time and you always wondered what was there? One day I went biking over there and there's a whole bunch of bees.
Yeah.
Like commercial bees.
Beekeeping is pretty popular in the northeast area where we live.
I've seriously considered it because the more I read about it on Corrosion, it looks like a very interesting hobby. If I wasn't doing a podcast, I probably would have tried at least once to have bees.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind to have like one bee box, but I don't think I can handle more than one, Yeah,
according to every beekeeper guy, though, you get stung like 1,000 times.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid that. That's not pleasant. But anyway, horrible bee disease.
Things of the day.
Oh, snaps.
Didn't you want to try to follow up with my awesome Hitler was born to be alive theme week?
I don't know if I'm going to do exactly that. I'm still thinking about something that's so amazing. I'm working on it. But this week I will do a theme week regardless. And since I only have to do 3 things, it shouldn't be too hard. Because we're not going to do things of the day on Thursday. Because we're going to Katsukan.
All right, Katsukan.
Yep.
Yeah.
But basically, I found this really cool video from back in the day of some jazz action. I figured I'd follow up your disco with some jazz. And what's his name? Brubaker?
Dave Brubeck?
Dave Brubeck. Yeah, Brubaker's a comic guy. Dave Brubeck and his band playing an awesome song. And the guy does an awesome drum solo on a rather minimalist drum set, which I think is really impressive, And it just reminded me, I look at all bands now, and when you see a drummer in a band, they got a bajillion drums and a whole bunch of stuff. This guy, that drum set looks like the thing that you can buy for a couple $100 in, like, Media Play. If Media Play still existed, It's the cheapest drum set for a little kid that actually is real drums. Yet, he's playing a really awesome drum solo on it. And that's pretty damn cool.
See, I could recommend... do you have any more things of the day for this theme?
Yeah, I got them. YouTube, basically anyone out there, if you like videos of old-timey jazz that's really awesome, YouTube is like a treasure trove. Holy crap. It's impossible not to find
Yep.
awesome jazz on YouTube or Google Video.
I mean, I guess I would generally recommend Count Basie is always good. Buddy Rich, my man, my absolute man. Mostly because I like playing all his stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm going to bring, this one's really good, and I'll bring 2 more to you this week, tomorrow and the next day.
All right.
Also awesome.
Can't argue with that. I mean, Hitler Born to Be Alive was one thing, but I don't think Hitler Born to Be Alive in terms of raw, I don't know, ability or actual impact on the world has anything on actual jazz from the golden ages of jazz.
Yeah, maybe we should, I don't know, pick a different genre of music each time. Who knows?
I call techno.
Damn. You took the easy one.
It's not so easy because there's more kinds of techno than there are days.
I still want to do a show explaining all the different kinds of techno. Well, electronic music.
Yeah.
Well, electronic dance music.
Yeah, because, I mean, you don't want to...
There is non-dance electronic music.
Well, there's electropop.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I'm
I
all
think
about
that would
that.
be a good show because a lot of people, you go up to them and you're like, techno, house, industrial, trance, and they don't know the difference between those things.
Don't forget my favorite, my boys, happy hardcore.
Yeah, and those are all completely different genres of music, and most people just call it all techno when it's not the case.
Even though usually in casual conversation I call it all techno because it doesn't
I also
matter.
call it all techno in casual conversation.
Like if I only will break it up if I'm talking to, I don't know, a DJ, or if I'm at a dance and I want to ask for a specific kind of music.
It's also interesting to learn about the origins of all the different genres, you know, because they're actually, some of them are pretty recently created, and it's pretty cool.
Also, if you type any one of those genres of electronic music into the Pirates Bay, you'll pretty much find 10 and 15 CD compilations of everything you'd ever want from them.
Yep. All right. What are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about...
Did you do your thing of the day?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I didn't. Great.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can't tell, we stayed up late pretty much all weekend.
I didn't. I don't have work to do. I've been sleeping and going, that's why I caught it.
Wait a minute. But when I came home and I said, you were so tired. You were talking about how tired you were.
Yeah.
And then when I asked, how could you be so tired? You said, well, I got up early and I did stuff all day.
I did. I got up at 8:30, which is when my body woke up and I wasn't tired.
So, what do you mean all this extra sleep business?
I'm getting extra sleep.
Uh-huh. We'll see how you feel when you start working again.
Like ass.
But anyway, I've seen this floating around on the internet bit by bit, and I want to just point it out and talk about it because I think it's both a good Flash video and at the same time, a kind of bad Flash video. It's a little video that someone put together that describes very simply how instant runoff voting works, which is a very interesting system you can use in political voting, or really any kind of voting, that more often, in most cases, will give you a better representation of what a large number of people actually want in a candidate in cases where there are more than 2 people running in an election.
Yep.
And IRVs are used in a bunch of places in the world. I mean, Australia uses them. I forget what other places. I think Ireland, but I don't remember offhand.
There are places in the world that use instant runoff voting as opposed to the kind of voting that everyone else uses, which is just you direct voting.
Now remember, instant runoff is one very specific kind, and there are runoffs.
There are many kinds of voting.
There are
Different
runoffs that aren't
systems all over the
interest.
place.
There's all sorts of similar.
I mean, imagine a world where like dig for the president.
Great.
Dig. There's all kinds of voting.
Vote for this picture of my cat to be president. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about the fact that a lot of dig front stories now are just a picture on Flickr.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. But anyway, so there are a bunch of different kinds of runoff voting. The one in particular of interest is IRV. It's the one that's been gaining a lot of steam in the United States lately. There are a lot of people who are proponents of it, and there are websites and Flash videos like this explaining how it works. And I'd say you should all watch it because it gives a really good rundown of how the system works. Basically, you rank a bunch of candidates in the order that you like them. It then counts everyone's first choice, and it's a normal vote. If a candidate has a majority, they win, and it's over. If no one has a majority, they drop whatever candidate has the least votes. Then they take everyone who voted for that candidate and use their second choice instead of their first choice. And you keep going down the line until someone gets the majority of the votes.
Mm-hmm. But aren't people going to need to have as many choices as there are candidates? Like, if there's 5 candidates, you're going to need to make 4 choices.
Well, you don't need to. The system can be run in a bunch of different ways. I mean, you could do it where no one needs a majority, but you use the majority in the first set, and then you just count the second or the third or whatever arbitrary set as gold. You can do whatever you want, and there's no rule as to how it has to be done.
Uh-huh.
The thing that I just want to point out is that this video, while it very simply describes the voting system...
it is clear that this Flash video is pro instant runoff voting.
Yes.
And it is attempting to explain it and present it in a favorable light to someone who isn't going to think too hard about it.
Now, while it is a very favorable thing anyway, and I'm very much for it in most cases, it does have problems. There is no such thing as a voting system that does not have problems, or that will always, no matter what the circumstances, accurately reflect the view of the majority. There's just no way to really do it. And I also worry that a system like this might confuse people in the United States.
There's no practical way to do it. You could use psychic powers.
Yeah, I don't know. If we get brain scanners enough, I mean, everyone just plugs in one day, and then...
They show you all the candidates, and then they make you read all their platforms, and they see when your brain is happy and when it's not happy, and then they pick based on that. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought this was interesting. And the reason I actually picked it was that I was going to use my favorite episode of Space Ghost ever, Space Ghost and the Fire Ants, which just overall, it's my favorite Space Ghost. I was going to talk all about Space Ghost and what was great about it, and how you had to watch it to actually enjoy it as opposed to it being just stupid. But Warner went on a rampage and got almost every piece of Space Ghost on the internet taken down. So I could not, in a short span of time, find a link to my previous thing of the day. If I find it, I will use it as my thing of the day ASAP.
Okay.
But anyway, you're listening to a podcast, which means in some way you have used the internet once or twice.
You use the internet's OMG.
Now, I remember when I used to play games online, one time I was playing Quake 2 on a server, and there was an argument. Someone was accusing someone else of cheating. The server was run by some 12-year-old moron who accused a friend of mine of cheating. Now, the rationale for his accusation was, 1, that the guy was doing really well, and 2, that his IP address had a 0 in it, which he swore you can't do. This guy's totally hacking. He has a 0 in his IP address, and then he banned the guy.
What the hell? Okay, that guy doesn't know shit.
Yeah, see, the thing is, a lot of people know what IP addresses are, you know, and DNS and all that. You type www.google.com and you get somewhere. You have 2 computers in your house, and you might know how to use a Windows share to get files from one to the other one or whatever. But a lot of people don't really know how IP addresses and internet connections work.
It's actually, it's not so complicated you can't understand it. It's just not really obvious, and there are some tricks going on there.
Yep.
Also, you're not going to know unless someone tells you or you figure it out.
On a whole, it is very complicated. If you try to take the whole thing in as a whole, from electrons being manipulated on a wire to you getting your gay, lesbian, furry, hentai, guro, pornography, whatever you're after on the internet.
Yeah, think about that. All the internet is a bunch of
pornography,
copper wires and fiber optic cables connecting a bunch of machines together, also wireless, connecting a bunch of machines together, millions and millions of machines all connected to each other somehow. And yet somehow, magically, information from just about any machine can get to any other machine when you want it to.
And think of this, the information that you're sending and receiving is just waves on wires that can be translated into ones and zeros.
Yep.
So how do those ones and zeros know where to go? How do they get specifically on the exact right wire to get from my computer sitting in front of me now all the way out to the internet to someone else's computer, up the right wire, and then into the right program on that computer?
It's crazy when you think about it. Electrons on wires somehow, which are equal porn, and they make it all the way around the world in this crazy maze that's more complex than any road you've ever driven on, and they do it so fast, it's insane. I
mean, think about when I send Scott an instant message in his room while I'm in my room. The program I'm using goes out to the internet through a bunch of network equipment in our house to our server, frontrowcrew.com in the sky, gets manipulated there, comes back into our house, goes down a different wire into Scott's computer, and then sends him a message.
It's really crazy
And
when you think about it in the big picture. It's absolutely unbelievable that it works. That's why you'll always hear computer people say it's a miracle that it even works. You know, because it's true. It is a miracle that any of this shit works.
Now, the thing is, while how that all works is super complicated, there's a lot to it and a lot of steps, it's actually very simple to understand if you break it up into each individual component. And there aren't actually that many components to it.
Aren't there 7?
8.
8. Oh,
Well, the thing is, we're going to use the 5-layer.
okay.
Because no one uses the full OSI model. We don't have to worry about it.
No.
But to make a long story short, the way information is sent over networks has been broken up into, depending on how you look at it, a number of layers. So think of it like a big stack of pancakes or a stack of boxes. You've got a stack of boxes, and you start at the top, and you put a kind of thing in a box, and then you put that thing in another box, and that thing in another box. So say I want to write a letter to my friend Adam, who lives in a house up with a bunch of other people in Albany. You know, mail. So I take my letter, and I write the information on it.
The letter is the porn.
Yes. Then I write Adam's name on the letter, so Adam knows this letter is for him, and I sign it saying this letter is for me. Then I encapsulate this letter. I fold it up, and I put it inside of an envelope. On the envelope, I put different information that says, you know, what city, what town, what house it's
Where
going
it's
to.
from, where it's going to, the postage.
Yep, because the post office, the intermediaries, don't care what's in my letter. They don't care who Adam is. They don't care that Adam's getting my letter. All they care about is where to deliver the letter. So I encapsulate it in this envelope, and the envelope has all the information that the post office needs. The post office looks at it, figures out where to go. So it gets to the house where Adam and all his friends live. Steve grabs it from the mailbox. He looks at it. Oh, it's a letter to our house. He opens it up. It says Adam on the inside. Oh, this is for Adam. So he opens the encapsulation, finds the more specific information that wasn't relevant to the outside world, and then he gives it to whoever it has to go to.
Mm-hmm.
The internet works in exactly the same way.
Only with a lot more envelopes.
Yep.
You take an envelope, you put it in another envelope, you put another envelope, and eventually the envelope is just electrons. And then you take all the envelopes off of the electrons, and it turns into prawn.
Now, we thought originally we'd
Or
start
podcast.
from the bottom up, because basically it starts at the very bottom, the physical layer, the actual, you know, there's electricity,
There's wires, electricity,
wireless,
fire,
all that stuff.
brimstone.
And then above that, there's something called the data link layer. And then there's the network layer. Then there's the transport layer. And then there's the application layer. But if we do that, this will probably be really boring and tedious because it would take a long time just to talk about the physical layer. And that's the part that you don't really ever interact with.
Yeah, I mean, other than plugging wires in, how the physical layer works is interesting to us, but you don't never need to know that, basically, ever. Like, I kind of know it. I never need to know it. If I never knew it, it wouldn't bother my life in the least.
Yep, and if I need to know it, I look it up again.
That's exactly right.
So what we're going to start with, and we'll explain what these are, don't worry about it, but we're going to start with the data link layer and then move into the network layer. Now, just so you know, so you have a frame of reference in case you know something about computers, the data link layer is basically MAC addresses, and the network layer is basically IP addresses.
Yep.
And you probably have the most interaction with those. The next layer up, for anyone who wants to read ahead, is ports. You've worked with those. You know, use BitTorrent. You have to use certain ports, type certain ports in, open ports up in the firewall, all that stuff.
Yep, that's the TCPs and the UDPs and all that stuff.
Yep, and that's the next layer up.
We're not going to talk about that right now.
Yep, and also we're going to go very briefly about the data link layer because
It's not really that complicated.
Yeah.
Unless you want to know all the stupid details.
I mean, think of this. Let's say you've got a simple network, a non-intelligent network, a flat network. You've got your house, right? You've got a hub that you bought, and you've got 3 computers connected to it.
So you have 3 computers, and they all have wires connecting every single computer. So every computer has a wire going from it to every other computer somehow because there's a hub, and that's basically what a hub is. You know?
Yep. So let's say you want to send information from computer A to computer B. How do the computers do that?
I mean, it's just wires connecting the computers, right? So how would one computer know which information goes to who? How does it guide it along one wire instead of another wire?
It's basically how do you send information, period, to another computer when all computers are equal on the same flat network where they can all see each other. And that's why it's called the data link layer. It's the lowest logical layer where you set up a data link between two computers. So two computers come up with a way to talk to each other and send data between themselves.
Mm-hmm. The way it is done is with the magical... Well, there's many ways to do it. I mean, I could come up with a brand new way of doing it right now and just implement it, and it would work, probably.
Yes, we're going to talk...
We're going to talk about the way that it is done with, Ethernets and the things that you use on the internets every day.
Yes, I mean, if you know more about networking than what we're talking about right now, we also know, but most of you don't care, so we're not going to get into that.
That's right. Well, the way it is commonly done these days is with a MAC address. Your network card, the thing in your computer that the wire plugs into, has a MAC address.
This is a very large number. It's a hexadecimal number, and as on any given network, this number is unique. There are so many of them that no two computers in a house, the odds of them having the same number are so remote that it'll never happen.
Usually the beginning of the number is the same for if you buy a 3Com card and another 3Com card, the beginning of the number will probably be the same for both cards, but the entire number is never the same. Also, a lot of cards allow you to just change the number to whatever you want. So
if you really wanted to, you could cause a problem for yourself by making all your MAC addresses the same.
If two computers on the same network have the same exact MAC address, they're not different at all, that will not work. They'll have a problem. But for all intents and purposes, the MAC addresses will always be unique, and the odds of them not being unique by accident are so ludicrously small, it's not a concern.
So basically, to simplify greatly, just so this is easy, if you want to talk to another computer, what your computer says is, I have information for MAC address X. And
let's just use single-digit numbers.
Yeah,
so you have computers 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yep, and they have MAC addresses 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yep.
So computer 1 says, I have data for computer 3, here it is. And it sends it out to the network, and all the computers see it.
Yep, because, there's just dumb wires connecting every computer. It can't choose to send... It's only sending it out one wire. Every computer hears this. It's like yelling. It's like, hey, I got something for number 3. Hey, something for number 3?
Yep, and number 1 and number 4, every other computer, no matter how many there are, has logic inside of it that could be software or hardware that looks at that number and says, that is not for me, I will ignore it. Or, that is for me, I will take it and process it.
Yep, so number 1 goes, I got something for number 3. And 2 and 4 go, they don't do shit. And number 3 goes, me. That's me.
Now, the drawbacks of this are that every computer hears every conversation that goes on in the entire network.
Yep.
And a number of other problems. The thing is, while computers hear the information, they don't look at it. It's like if I start talking to Scott in French, and Scott understands French, but to use Adam again, Adam is sitting here, he doesn't understand French. He can't understand what I'm saying. But if Adam wanted to be tricky, he could go into promiscuous mode.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah, but just in case anyone wondered, people have, you hear that word a lot. All promiscuous mode is where you have a computer, and not only will it listen to the stuff that's for it, but you can tell it to listen to everything it hears on the wire, regardless of who it's for.
This is why if you plug into a hub or a Wi-Fi network, usually with some other people around, and there's no switches or routers between you and them, you're just on a hub, that you can see what they're doing on the internet by entering promiscuous mode. That's a security risk.
Yep, so Adam could sit there with a French to English dictionary and figure out what we were saying, even though he shouldn't really be listening. And
no, he should.
And there's I can't say there's no way. There is almost no way for us to figure out this is happening.
Yeah. We're not going to get into the way you figure it out, because there is a way to figure it out.
There's some awesome stuff I can talk about. If there's anyone out there who's interested, we can do an episode about the more technical aspects of all this.
Yeah, we could do how to detect hackers on your network and stuff like that.
That'd be a good episode.
It's interesting but complicated stuff.
If you guys want a technical episode like that, let us know.
Yeah. Anyway, so number 3 goes me. And number 1 hears that. And
they just talk back and forth. And 2 ignores the whole conversation. And if 2 wants to talk, he talks to whoever, and it just works.
Yep.
Now, obviously, this is how computers worked for a long time, because there weren't that many computers. So you've got one network now like this.
Yeah, you would have computers networked with a daisy chain, where computer 1 would be plugged into 2, 2 would be plugged into 3, 3 would be plugged into 4, and if they wanted to talk, it just went back and forth down the row.
Or even if they were all with a hub, so they all had their own wires, it was still as though it was one big wire, where every conversation is everywhere. Now imagine if the whole internet was like that. it would grind to a halt. Because anytime someone looking at pornography on a Chinese computer from France, my computer is going to hear that conversation. And so is every other computer
all
in the world.
Porn. Imagine hearing all the porn in the world at once.
That's far worse than any Lovecraftian horror.
It is. I think it's a new Lovecraftian horror.
Wow. Hearing the internet.
Porn Dulu. There's probably a website about that, and it's not. It's no.
You know what? I can almost say with certainty that there effectively are hentai about that.
Yeah. All right. So how do we solve that problem?
Yes. Well,
how do we defeat Porn Thulu?
We were talking as though there's one network, the network in your house. Now, what if you have more than one network? Now, to skip a lot, a network is segregated. So we've got the flat network in my house. And then we've got another flat network up in Adam's house. So he has his 3 computers, 1, 2, and 3. And I have my 3 computers, A, B, and C. And all 3 of my computers can talk, and all 3 of his computers can talk. But none of those computers know my computers exist and vice versa. How can they talk to each other? That is what an internet is. You see, uppercase internet, lowercase internet. There can be an internet. An internet is just multiple networks connected together.
Yep. When someone says the internet with a capital I, they are talking about the internet, the thing that this podcast is being delivered to you on. The series of tubes.
Yes.
Is the capital I internet.
Yes, which refers specifically to either Internet 1 or Internet 2.
Yep. Lowercase I internet is just networks that are connected to each other. Or maybe you could say they are internetworked.
Ho ho!
Ho ho! That's lowercase I internet.
Now, this is layer 3, the network layer. It's also the IP layer, IP addresses. You see, all an IP address is a set of numbers that tell you, if you know how to read it, what network a computer is on, and then on that network, which computer it is. So it's kind of like a street address.
Mm-hmm.
So if a MAC address is my name, Rim, or Scott's name, Scott, then an IP address is the address on the front of our house.
Yep. It's like you find our house, it's like the network is the roads. You find our house by our address, but there's 2 MAC addresses here, Rim and Scott, and then you need to figure out which one of those. And you'd open up the envelope, and it would say Rim or Scott inside, and then you deliver it to the right place.
Now, it used to be that, IP addresses are number. It used to be broken up where all networks boundaries were on those numbers. So say
in the olden days when there weren't so many computers.
So the way this works, and I promise it'll make sense, say you've got an IP address, 129.21.21.1. That is actually a very useful DNS server that you can all hit as much as you want.
Hooray.
It's always up and it's at RIT.
Awesome.
It's also easy to remember. But, if you got this IP address, 129.21.21.1. Now, this would be a Class B address. So in the old days, the 129.21 was the network address. So 129.21.0.0 was one network as far as the world was concerned.
Yeah, so every IP address from 129.21.0.0 through 129.21.255.255 was all the same network. That's 200. That's a lot of computers.
Yes, a lot of computers.
Yeah.
So, 129.21.0.0 is the network, but the IP address is 129.21.21.1. The .21.1 is the specific computer in that network. So when I send a packet out, when I want to send data to that computer, I put in the IP address 129.21.21.1. It goes out to the internet and hits a router. The router doesn't care what computer it's going to, because that would be stupid. It would have to know where every computer in the world was. It only actually cares where the networks are. So it sees, 129.21, that network is this way.
Yep. I mean, think about what a router is. It's basically a machine. It's really a computer with a bunch of network cables coming into it. And each one goes someplace different. And all the router really has to do, when you get right down to it, is take stuff in from a wire and figure out which other wire, maybe even the same wire, to send it out on. It's like a mail sorting guy. So when it comes in, he says, this is 129. And the router is configured to know if it says 129, it goes out that wire. And he sends it out that wire. And it gets to another router and another router. And the routers, as you get closer, they know more about where it's supposed to go.
Yep, so 129 and then 21, and eventually it gets to the edge of the RIT network, the 129.21 network, the router on the outside at the edge, and the whole world knows nothing about what's behind that router because they don't have to. That router doesn't know anything about the rest of the world other than how to get out. But it knows everything about the stuff inside of it. Or at least, I mean, it could be broken up into little subnetworks within, but don't worry about that. So that computer says, all right, I'm the 129.21 network. This packet is obviously for me. So it looks inside and says, oh, it's going to 21.1. And it wants to send it to 21.1. And there's a computer called 21.1. Now, that data link layer, those MAC addresses, are still there. How does my computer know that 21.1 is my name? I know what my MAC address is, and I know what my IP address is, but how does the wire get to me if it's not a flat network, if it's not all one giant network? The answer is the router will then do something called ARP. This gets a little technical, and you can probably just not worry about it, but just so you know, the router will basically say, I have got something for 129.21.21.1. I know you're on this network, I know you're here, and I know you can hear me. And it sends this as a broadcast to everyone on the network. The computer who has that IP address responds to the MAC address that asked with, I am 21.1. You now know my MAC address. You can now have a data link with me and send me that data.
Yep, so check it out. My MAC address is secret. Rim doesn't know it. Rim, I don't know. I'm looking for Rim. I know his IP address, but I don't know that it's Rim, and I don't know his MAC address either. But since we're on the same network, we're connected to the same hub, you know, I got to give it to him. There's no other way.
And he knows that I will hear any conversation on the network, so he can broadcast, he can shout, say, anyone answer me, I have a question, and I'll hear it.
All I know is the IP address I'm looking for and my own MAC address, which isn't very helpful. So I say, is there anyone with this IP address? I know you're there. And Rim says, that is me, and this is my MAC address. Now I know Rim's MAC address. Now we forget about the IP addresses. We do the thing we talked about before, where I know his MAC address, he knows mine because I told it to him, and I send him whatever needed to be sent. The IP addresses go away once you get to the end of the IP layer.
Yep, because you see, we said, MAC addresses are unique. You'll never have two MAC addresses that are the same on a network. Outside of one network, you could all have every other computer out there. You don't care what the MAC address is. That's why you don't need to know anyone's MAC address ever to connect to them.
As long as the IP addresses aren't the same.
Yep. But you don't know what their MAC address is. You only know what the IP address is. And IP, the networking routing protocol, it makes a way to connect networks. So your data gets to the network, and then in the network, that network figures out the MAC address and sends it. So there is no way for me in my house to find out the MAC address of anything in Adam's house, nor would that information help me at all.
Yep, to send information between different computer networks, you need the IP address. That's basically the address of the different networks. And once the network that is supposed to get the stuff gets it, so someone sends something to my network, when they know my IP address, I eventually get the goods. Then I just need the MAC address. I don't need this IP address anymore because it's on the right network now.
Now you're probably thinking, all right, Rim and Scott, you just said all this, but then how come if I'm connecting to a computer on my same network, I have to type the IP address and not the MAC address? And the answer is because even then, it works the exact same way. Your computer goes through the motions and says, I have something for this IP address, and it asks the router, and it sends the data to the router. And the router says, that's right here. I'm going to send this right back where it came from and ask for the MAC address of whose business this is.
Yep. You know how when you set up your network connection on your computer, there's a default gateway? Basically, if you're trying to send something with your computer to an IP address, right? If you try to send something to an IP address that's on your network that you're on right now, then you can send it to the guy who's there right now.
Yep, because see, your computer at all times knows two things about the world. It knows what network it is on currently. It knows what network it is living in, and then it has the default gateway that Scott brought up.
Yep. And so if an IP address that you're looking for with your computer, your computer will know if that IP address is on the network that you're already on. So it'll just send stuff to that IP address and do the whole ARP thingy.
Yep, it'll do the MAC address thing. It won't even ask the router because it knows I'm on this network. If I try to mail a letter to Scott, I know where Scott is. I just do it here. I don't tell the router. I know any mail for Conklin Street, I just bring right back here.
Yep. Now, the default gateway is what it says. It's the default gateway, the gateway to the rest of the world, the default one. So if you ever have something to send somewhere, and it's not someone who's right here, because you know if it's someone who's right here, because it's someone living in your house, they're on the same network as you. You, by default, give it to the default gateway. You say, hey, you're the default gateway, take this and put it on the internet. Because I don't know where it's supposed to go. It doesn't go here. It goes somewhere else. You take it. And the default gateway is usually, like if you have a Wi-Fi router in your house or a cable modem, that's your default gateway, that little thing right there.
Yep, and you don't know, your computer doesn't know anything about the wide world of the internet out there.
It doesn't know
knows
shit.
Is, if I don't know where this is, I ask that guy, and that guy will take care of it. And that guy doesn't actually know where anything is either in this case. He usually sends it to the giant router that your ISP has, and that router knows where stuff is.
Yeah, there are, most routers that you're going to encounter, basically, they do the same thing. They either... it's on this network, and we're going to take care of it right here, or it's somewhere else default gateway. The routers that actually choose where stuff has to go, you will never handle in your life. Almost never. Unless you're work at an ISP or something like that.
Yep. And the only other thing I'd really like to bring up a little bit, because a lot of people don't know what these are, and they're a source of great confusion and problems the world round, and I'm going to do this in the most non-technical way possible.
You going to talk about the subnet mask?
I'm going to talk about the subnet mask, because you all see it. You all see, IP address, subnet mask. And not many people know what that subnet mask is, and you wonder, why is it there? How come it's always a bunch of 255s?
Yep.
What's the deal there?
Well, remember how we just said that your computer knows if an IP address is on this network or some other network? The subnet mask is how you figure out if something is on this network or some other network.
Now, subnet masks used to not be necessary. It used, they used to break the internet up, if you look at the IP addresses, along those dots. Class A was the first dot. So any number up to a certain number, you knew intrinsically how big the network was, how much of that number described the network, and how much of that number described the actual computer in the network. For example, in the 129.21.21.1, it was a Class B network. The subnet mask was 255.255.0.0. So effectively, the network was 129.21.0.0. And the rest of that number was the computer. So the subnet mask, now the reason the subnet mask seems weird is because you're looking at it in decimal or possibly in hexadecimal.
Yep.
That's the only reason it looks weird. Because if you turn that IP address into binary, into ones and zeros, you'll find that 255 it fills that part of the number before that dot with all ones.
Yep.
So a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0 says the first two numbers are all ones and the second two numbers are all zeros. And when you want to figure out what network you're on, you take the IP address, which, could 129.21.21.1. So what you essentially do is if you do an AND, we talked about logic a long time ago.
That was the first episode of how computers work.
Yeah, the one that everyone thought was too complicated.
Yeah.
So to skip all that, basically think of it this way. If you got ones, you pass the data through and keep it. And if you got zeros, you ignore it. So
it's like wearing a mask, which is why it's called a mask. Let's say, it's like half of my face. If it's 255, 255, 00, then the first two 255s are all ones and the second half is all zeros. So I got a mask covering half of my face and the other half of my face shows through.
So the 255.255.00 subnet mask lets the 129.21 through and gets rid of the 21.1. So now you know what network you were describing exactly. You can take an IP address and with that subnet mask, extract the network you are on from it.
Yep, so basically, you take the subnet mask, which is like a mask you wear on your face, and if I'm looking for an IP address, I take that IP address that I'm looking for, and I apply it to the subnet mask. I put this mask over that IP address, and I look at the bits left over. And by looking at those leftover bits, I can tell if it's an IP address that is on my network or if it's an IP address on some other network. And if it is on some other network, I just send the information to the default gateway because he'll take care of it. And if it's on my network, then I'll take care of it.
Yep, and the reason this is important, because now...
I'll tell an anecdote of a messed up subnet mask.
But basically, back in the day, you always broke networks up by the dots. But now we have something called CIDR, which stands for Classless Interdomain Routing. And to not bother you with the details, it basically means you can break up the networks in places other than the dots.
Yep.
So you could have a subnet mask of 255.255.255.128.
Holy crap, you're crazy.
And most people don't use that notation anymore. They use this slash notation. So you might see an IP address like 129.21.21.1/24. Basically, all that number is the number of ones in that mask. Yep. So if you write the IP address out in binary, and then you write that number of ones out in binary and make the rest zeros, you can do an operation between those two and get the network out of any IP address.
Yep. Here's a tale of a messed up subnet mask to tell you what the problem here is, right? So we had this hosting, and I configured, a static IP address, which means I had to type in all the information. I made a typo while doing the subnet mask. It turned out to be 255.000 instead of 255.255.255. I typed it wrong. 255 turned into a 0. So a bunch of ones were missing.
So what did this mean? Why is this an issue?
Well, what happened is I think the IP address was like 64, 63 or something like that.
Yep.
It was weird. But the point is, what happened, the computer, when it would look for an IP address, right, that had the same... Like, normally, I think the IP address of the computer, let's say it was 64.63. Whatever, okay? Normally, if something else is 64.63, that's on the same network, right? This computer, because the 255 was a 0, it thought that anything that began with 64 was the same network. So it forgot about the 63.
Yep. So if there's a 64 out there in the world, like 64.1...
Right.
And Scott
for example, dig.
Yep.
So... the computer, when it would try to contact dig, would say, all right, I'm looking for this 6465 IP address. Is that on the same network? Yes, it is. When it wasn't, because only 6463 is on the same network, not 6465.
Yep.
And it would try to send it thinking it was right there, and it wouldn't send it to the default gateway, and the computer was unable to communicate with anything that had an IP address beginning with 64 that was not actually on the same network.
Yep, all because the subnet mask was too small. It was looking at too small a part of the IP address to figure out what network it was on. So as a result, it thought it was on a much larger network than it really was.
It's like if you thought the address of your whole house was 64 instead of 6433.
So if you thought that Bill Gates lived in your house, you thought that everyone named Bill lived in your house.
Exactly.
So if you want to call Bob, you look in the phone book. You want to call Bill, any Bill Gates, Bill Watterson, whoever.
Yep.
You just kept yelling their name out and wonder why they don't answer.
When the only person who actually lived in your house was Bill Jones. And Bill Jones would still get his stuff because you thought he lived in your house, and he did. But Bill Gates, you thought he lived in your house, and he didn't. So you would never send out his mail, and you would thus be unable to communicate with him.
Well, we tried to not be technical.
But it's kind of hard not to when you have all these numbers that are hard to get around.
Yep. Also, the fact that while the concepts themselves are simple, I realized after the fact, as I kept, picturing, because I teach this to people a lot, because people always ask, and usually we draw pictures that make it so much easier, and I realized halfway through that we can't do that.
No, we can't.
On the internet with a podcast.
Well, there are still plenty of websites with plenty of pictures. I think our goal is to mostly use, metaphorical examples and such.
Yep. However, as I've given this disclaimer before, if anyone decides to say, your metaphor wasn't perfect or whatever...
Because people keep doing that to us, and we're like, what the hell's wrong with you?
I'll just warn you that we know on a very low level how it works. I mean, I went to school...
We know all this shit. This is why we're doing a podcast on it. We're just not explaining all the details and getting everything exactly perfect and everything.
I mean, God.
Because what's the point in that?
Yeah, think of this. I took 2 classes at RIT that were basically just how these 2 layers and the layer above it work, and nothing more.
Yep, I took one whole class on that, and then I took other classes where I had to write software that actually dealt with this shit.
Hell, I took a class on exactly how you turn ones and zeros into voltage on a wire and all the different ways to do it.
Yeah, craziness.
Now, I guess my question to all of you before we head out for the night was, we did this in a very non-technical way, and we obviously couldn't cover a lot of detail and a lot of interesting things that we kept wanting to talk about. Are you guys interested in this? I would be not at all opposed.
Was this interesting, or was it complicated and boring?
I would not at all be opposed to doing this same topic with a much higher level of a much higher technical level. However, I don't know if there's how many of you would actually care about that, or how many of you who would care about it.
Yeah, does anyone actually care about how the electricity goes over the wires so that the computers understand?
Or do you care how IP addresses really work and how network cards parse them out by doing a binary logic on the subnet masks?
Yeah, do you care about like IPv6? Because all we've been talking about is IPv4, which is what everyone uses.
Yep, or do you care how an ARP really works and what specific, how does a computer know a broadcast from a non-broadcast, or these things called multicast,
or do you care about how a switch does its thing, or how a router actually does its thing? It's complicated stuff.
Yeah, basically give us some direction in the forums, www.frontrowcrew.com, as to what you want to hear about networking wise and what level of technical difficulty you want, and we can serve it up. This is one of the few topics we actually know what we're talking about.
Yep. All right. So,
come see us at Katsucon.
Yeah, Katsucon this weekend. This weekend in DC.
Yes.
Come see us for awesome. We'll be doing awesome the whole time.
We'll be live in the video game room pretty much anytime we're not doing some other event. We're running an anime match game, which is always fun. We'll be podcasting, or at least recording live at the con pretty much the whole time.
The whole time? Do we have enough storage space for all that?
I imagine we will, if we bring multiple computers.
We've also got some stuffs that we'll bring.
Yes, stuffs. We won't say what stuffs. Yeah.
Don't expect too much, but don't expect nothing.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via audio. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.